Hourglass is a 4v4 symmetrical map for Halo 5 Guardians. Plays all the arena game types: Slayer, Strongholds, CTF, and Oddball. I made this map for a contest. I worked with an artist while I handled level design. The hook to the map, the theme to the map, is this mysterious Forerunner construct. Some sort of ancient machine. You can see something's coming out and watching the sand as it counts each individual grain. The inspiration from Hourglass came from a bowl fountain. So that's those fountains that have a bowl of water at the top that fills up, overspills, and pours into the next one, and into the next one, and to the next one. The idea here, though, is instead of water, it's sand. You can kind of see the map is made of 3 bowls. Leaning on the inspiration, the idea behind Hourglass's gameplay is that I wanted the gameplay to flow down the bowls just like the sand or the water would in the fountains. And so that means I really wanted the gameplay to take place on the outside of the map. So I'll start by going through the individual areas, and then I'll talk about some of the challenges I faced in each one. We're over here on red base. I'm going to start with the highest point of the map, the tower. The interesting challenge we wanted for this map was to be able to create this high bowl, but not make it dominate gameplay. And through the spine I can see the enemy tower. The reason we left this so exposed, with just a little bit of sightlines to make the combat interesting, is so that one way that I can challenge this tower as a player is to simply get on my own tower. Meaning if I've got someone camping up in theirs, I've got that weakened. Something that's not immediately apparent from the video, but you'll be familiar with if you played Halo 5, is that we've actually got a red reticle distance, so that when I'm unscoped with the pistol, the primary weapon they're going to have on this map, the players, I don't actually have auto-aim out here, so I need to be scoped in order to challenge a player. That means I can harass people and keep them with low shields on the other side, but I probably can't finish a kill without leaving the tower. There is one rifle on the map, but for the most part we left that out, and that was an intentional goal, is to make sure that it was easy to harass, but hard to drive someone off. So the idea is to entice players to come down. The other thing I want to talk about, I mentioned earlier, were these ramps, but let's say I'm fighting someone who's down here, on the enemy side of the pit. Note that I can't actually block the sightline. What makes elevation powerful is if I can hide behind it. If someone's standing right here on the rock, if I can crouch behind it, they can't finish me off. What we did intentionally with this slope is so that if I'm fighting someone in this area, I am vulnerable all the way, because as I move back, I'm moving up the slope. I'm up the slope, and now I'm here. So I've got this long extended vulnerability period. So even though I'm up high, I've lost one of the key advantages of elevation, of being able to control the sightline with other players. The next area we'll talk about is the bowl right below the tower. So this is the second tier of the map. What we've got here is a simple spawn area. I've got an escape route and flag game types. The flag normally spawns right here, meaning I've got players who can take it and jump down to a lower level and potentially disappear. The more interesting part is that this is also the player's starting spawn, which gives them access to nearly anywhere on the map. This is a fairly open area, and I think it demonstrates some of the segmentation techniques we tried to use. If I'm standing in red base, I actually can't be shot from many other locations. Potentially someone on their tower could harass me, but I can very easily get out of the way. Someone from red ramp can't actually see me because of this elevation until they advance. Someone from the tower actually needs to come down because this is in the way, and I can't make it up this back area. So if I'm in red base, I'm actually safe from anyone who's not in red base, other than these key points there and there. What this means is that the encounters that I have inside a given room are going to be over very quickly. I don't have a whole lot of cover, and the map's going to play a lot like the rig, where if I move into an area, if I'm able to turn the corner and get visibility into a space, I can clear it out. It makes pushes more powerful, but it also means gameplay resolves sooner, so I'm missing a little bit. And this is where segmentation really comes into play, is to make sure that people can live long enough in order to set up satisfying encounters. What we have down here is another junction. This is below the base. And what I have is I have a lift access up to red tower. You can see the hole where I came down from red base. And I can also push forward into the pit. We'll talk about that area next. I I've also got an area out into the flats, and this is where the stronghold spawns, which is one of the objective modes. And finally, I've got a path around the back of the base, which leads out into Red Wing. We'll include that as part of here. This is really the bottom tier, and what the bottom tier offers, because it's so limited on elevation, is pathing options to other parts of the map. Players here are in traversal mode. Although I do expect encounters to happen, and we spent a little bit of time on sort of this big sightline to make some combat interesting, for the most part, the goal of the map was to make sure that combat's happening on the outside. So here, this is all about accessibility to other sections of the map. This is one of the best set pieces in the map. Obviously, we have the main aesthetic hook, as well as the theme you can see from the circular bowls we used up on the towers. We use that to hollow this out to really make it tie in. So this is a pretty powerful room in terms of the items you can pick up, but you'll note it's quite exposed in terms of actually leaving. I told you that the cave was all about traversal mode. The cave was all about, you've given up elevation, you're giving up killing power, so let you move. But in this case, I'm actually able to pick up some things here. And this is a center point. This isn't owned by any one team. So we wanted to make sure that players came to this area as a means of promoting flow, hence the rocket launcher, hence the only rifle on the map, the light rifle. But we wanted to make sure it was an opportunity to punish players for using this. We showed this earlier on the tower sightline, but you can see that I've got a very commanding view of the enemy's approach here. Obviously, if I see someone too exposed, I can take advantage of my ground pound. Land a nice, crispy crunch. This is really fun to do. It's really satisfying to land a huge ground pound. The thing is that I've just committed. I've just given up a lot of elevation in return for what I hope is a hype kill. But I'm now in the same boat that someone else was. And what we see is that this is ended up creating a vacuum where players tend to move upward through the map to gain elevation, and then they come down into this pit, either chasing a power weapon or trying to finish off a kill. So that's one intentional design here in order to make sure that gameplay sort of recycles itself and doesn't just cycle up to the top. Instead of the stick of let's nerf players' ability to use that lip, let's give them a carrot as well of here's a reason to come down. Let's explore the flats next. This is right below the base. In a strongholds mode, this is actually one stronghold location, meaning I can actually see across the way to the other one. It's a bit far for pistol distance, but it's enough to challenge. You can see I've got a ramp going up to the middle, and we'll talk about that last here because that transitions nicely into the next base. That's sort of the key feature here. The other thing to think about is when you're attacking this area, we'll go over to blue side to see this, but when I attack from this area, I'm actually quite well shielded from the enemy's tower and base. See this rock outcropping here? If I'm on the far outside, which is sort of the safe approach from down here, I might expose myself out there to someone who's standing up top. But if I'm hugging the inside, they can't really see me. So this allows stealthy approaches to the base, even if it doesn't allow a whole lot of kill potential here. And in the initial version of the map, this bridge didn't exist. And what we found out is that players, although they naturally wanted to be at the top, kept coming down via the pit or spawning down here in the safe spawn zone. And what they ended up doing is they ended up not being able to make it back up. We had too many encounters that were happening over the junction here, inside the pit or inside the bases, because players couldn't live long enough to get to the top. But that's really the big goal we wanted here, right? What we wanted to see is players playing on the bowl like the sand. So I'd have people on the tower, I'd have gameplay out here, and I'd have gameplay in this bottom area. So what this ramp did is it gave people an easy access to get elevation. But the trade-off is that, yes, they're moving up the map, but they're moving into an exposed neutral area. This is pretty effective at driving players to come up and actually push the Hydra, pick it up. Now, the thing is that people didn't do this when the Hydra wasn't up. And this is where we added our last carrot, the Needler. As you know, in Halo 5, Needlers are quite powerful. They're tracking weapons. They come out very fast and they blow people up. It's great, especially if you have juicy open sightlines. So pushing a Needler here that allows us to come over the top and have kill potential here, or be able to look down into someone else's yard is really, really powerful. I can make a very strong push to get a foothold on the enemy side of the map, or attack a stronghold if I've got this Needler. But this was a key carrot in bringing gameplay out of this yard, which is good, but up into this top bowl, which is what we're really looking for, up into the stage. The last area I want to show off is the stage and the relic. This is really the halfway point of the map. This is the secondary power weapon because it's a little bit less commitment than the rocket launcher, because I can actually take this and I can move down to these areas down here. Whoa, careful, don't fall. And there's just a couple other sightlines I want to show. One of them is the tension between as I'm moving out of stage and attacking the enemy base. I've got this sightline blocker to work with to protect me from the tower. Ultimately, I have to move outside of it in order to advance. So now I've opened myself up to players on their ramp. Players that I'm actually fighting in the base and the tower. So although this is exposed, there's a lot of firepower that can be brought to bear on a player that's moving out there. The other big thing is the ability to run across the stage from my area and make it down into the protected shelter of the yard. This leads to some interesting gameplay loop where we've got a player who's guarding up here on the tower. He puts some shots on you, and you slide down through the hole into here. So he can say, hey, I've got 2 shots, I know I can finish this. He can run, boost, and then ground pound and get a kill. So you're able to defend the base that way. But note what just happened. Your defender just left the tower, potentially the most powerful spot on the map for your team. So although a player who's pushed across here might individually lose an encounter, he's actually moved a big piece of the defending team's setup. So there you have it. That's Hourglass. The big evolution of this map was taking a very chunky block out where we just had flat circles here on the towers, the base, and the bottom, and really trying to build out the macro gameplay. So just trying to get at the sense of like, what would it take to get players to move on this outside of the map and not in the caves like I wanted. The big thing was that bridge revelation I told you about, which was giving players access to elevation that put them in the center of the map. And that's what led to this bridge being added from yard, as well as this lift here that takes us into stage. After we had the macro gameplay in place, we really doubled down on the micro gameplay. And that's when little innovations like using the tricks with the slopes to make sure someone's exposed on the tower, even if they're fighting down, works out well. As well as some of the stuff like the thing I pointed out where players from the tower have to jump over this in order to kill someone in the yard. So we really tried to tune individual encounters from space to space, and then working on adding some variety, taking the pit from a flat room to the interesting rocks and rails that are down here, as well as the set piece. As usual, player testing was huge for this map. There's nothing quite like real feedback to show you where your design's coming up short, and I'm really excited to see how this does in the Forge contest. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough, and please leave any comments or reach out if you've got any questions. Thanks for listening.